I need to tell you about something that happened to me last year, something that still keeps me awake at night. My name is Dr. Eric Davidson, and I've been a brain surgeon for 11 years at Valley Presbyterian Hospital in Paramus, New Jersey. That's just outside Newark. I'm not the type to believe in things I can't explain. I deal in facts, X-rays, CT scans, things I can see and measure. But what happened last March has shaken everything I thought I knew about the human brain. Before I go any further, let me be clear about something. This isn't a ghost story. I'm not talking about spirits or demons or anything like that. What I'm about to tell you is documented in medical records. Other doctors saw it, nurses saw it, the equipment recorded it, but none of us can explain it. And that's what terrifies me most. Let me back up and give you some context. I work in what's called a Level Y trauma center. That means we handle the worst of the worst: car accidents, construction injuries, gunshot wounds, falls from height. If someone has a serious head injury in northern New Jersey, there's a good chance they end up on my operating table. I've done this hundreds of times. Brain surgery is what I do. It's what I'm good at. Or at least, I thought I understood it. March 14th started like any other night shift. I was on call, which means I'm the surgeon who handles any emergencies that come in between 6 in the evening and 8 the next morning. It was cold that night, late winter in New Jersey, temperatures in the 30s, that kind of damp cold that gets into your bones. I remember standing outside the hospital around 11 o'clock, drinking bad coffee from the cafeteria, just trying to stay awake. You could hear sirens in the distance, traffic on the highway, normal city sounds. My pager went off at 11:47. That's a little device doctors carry that buzzes when the emergency room needs us. The message said they had a 34-year-old man with severe head trauma coming in. He'd fallen from the 4th floor of a parking garage, fell head first onto concrete. When someone falls from that height and lands on their head, they usually don't make it. But this man was still alive, barely. I went down to the emergency room. His name was Cole Franklin, brown hair, medium build, young guy. He was completely unconscious. We have a scale we use to measure how unconscious someone is. It goes from 3 to 15. 15 means you're wide awake and talking. 3 means you're as deeply unconscious as a person can be. Cole was a 4. That's about as bad as it gets while still being alive. The emergency room doctor, a woman named Dr. Vivian Arnold, showed me the CT scan. That's the imaging we use to see inside the skull. What I saw made my stomach drop. He had bleeding on both sides of his brain. The skull was fractured in multiple places. The pressure inside his head was so high that his brain was being pushed to one side. Without immediate surgery, he would die within hours. By 12:30 in the morning, I had Cole Franklin on the operating table. My team consisted of myself, a younger doctor named Dr. Paige Sutton, who was learning neurosurgery, 2 surgical nurses, and an anesthesiologist. That's the doctor who keeps patients asleep during surgery. His name was Wesley Chandler, and he'd been doing this for 20 years. Good, solid team. Brain surgery is delicate work. We removed a section of his skull, about the size of your palm, to get to the bleeding underneath. When we opened up the protective covering around the brain, blood poured out. Dark, thick blood that had been squeezing his brain. I carefully removed all of it, piece by piece, using suction and special instruments. It took hours. We had to do this on both sides of his head. By 3:15 in the morning, the surgery was done. We'd removed all the blood we could find. His brain looked bruised and swollen, but that was normal after this kind of injury. Here's the important part. We left the skull pieces out. We do this deliberately when the brain is very swollen. It gives the brain room to expand without being crushed against bone. We keep those bone pieces frozen, and a few weeks later, when the swelling goes down, we put them back in a second surgery. Now we also placed a small device inside his skull. It's called an intracranial pressure monitor, ICP monitor for short. Think of it like a tiny pressure gauge that tells us how much pressure is building up inside the skull. Normal pressure is below 15. Anything over 20 is concerning. Cole's pressure after surgery was 22. Not great, but manageable with medication. We sent him to the intensive care unit at 4:30 a.m. The ICU is where we keep the sickest patients. the ones who need constant monitoring. I wrote out all my instructions for the nurses, gave them a report on the surgery, and told them to call me immediately if anything changed. Then I went back to my office to rest. I have an old leather couch in there. I laid down, but I couldn't really sleep. Your mind keeps running after a surgery like that. Did I miss anything? Is there more bleeding I didn't see? These questions haunt every surgeon. I must have dozed off because my pager woke me at 6:02 a.m. It was the ICU nurse. "Dr. Davidson, you need to come see Mr. Franklin right away. Something's wrong with him." I practically ran to the ICU. The nurse who'd called me was named Melody Higgins. She'd been an ICU nurse for 15 years, very experienced, not the type to panic over nothing. But when I saw her face, I knew something was seriously wrong. "His pressure reading spiked to 45 about 20 minutes ago," she told me. "We gave him all the medications we're supposed to give, but it's not coming down. And doctor, there's something else. You need to see this yourself." I walked into Cole Franklin's room. He looked the same as he had when we'd finished surgery just a few hours before. Pale skin, bandages wrapped around his head, breathing tube taped in his mouth with a machine doing the breathing for him. But when I looked at the pressure monitor, my heart sank. It read 48. That's critically high. That's the kind of pressure that kills people. "Did you give him another dose of the medicine?" I asked. "We did. Twice. No change." I looked at the other monitors. His blood pressure was way too high, 180 over 110. His heart rate was slow, 62 beats per minute. These are classic warning signs that someone's brain is under too much pressure. It's the body's last-ditch effort to force blood into the brain. When you see this combination, you know the patient is dying. "We need to get him back to the CT scanner right now," I said. "He might be bleeding again." We rushed him back down for another scan. I stood there watching the images appear on the screen, slice by slice through his brain. I was expecting to see new bleeding. Maybe the surgery hadn't worked. Maybe something had torn loose. But what I saw made no sense. There was no new bleeding. None. The brain looked swollen, yes, but no worse than I'd expected. Actually, it looked slightly better than before. The shift of the brain to one side had improved. "Run it again," I told the CT technician. He looked at me strangely. "Doctor, we just completed a full scan." "I know. Do it again." He did. Same results. No bleeding. No reason for the pressure to be 48. We brought Cole back to the ICU. I checked every connection on the pressure monitor. Everything was solid. The device was working correctly. I could see the normal waveform pattern on the screen, but it was telling me something impossible. Then something strange happened. I was standing next to his bed, my hand resting on his chest while I thought about what to do next. And I felt something, a vibration, very faint, like when you stand next to a washing machine during the spin cycle. But we weren't near any machines. I lifted my hand and looked at it. Nothing. I put it back on his chest. There it was again, a rhythmic vibration that didn't match his heartbeat or his breathing. "Melody, come here. Put your hand on his chest. Tell me what you feel." She did. Her eyes went wide. "What is that? Is that from the air conditioning system?" "Air conditioning doesn't create a pulse like that," I said. Dr. Sutton had arrived for morning rounds. I called her over. "Paige, put your hand on his chest. Tell me what you feel." She did. She looked at me with confusion. "I don't understand. Where's that coming from?" 3 doctors and a nurse all feeling the same unexplainable vibration coming from a patient who was supposed to be deeply unconscious. And the pressure monitor now read 51. Over the next hour, we ran every test we had available. Blood tests, chemistry panels, everything. The results were normal. Well, as normal as you'd expect for someone who just had brain surgery. Nothing that would explain why his brain pressure was skyrocketing. Then we did something I'd never done before. We completely replaced the pressure monitor with a brand new device, fresh out of sterile packaging. A nurse from a different floor brought it up. We disconnected the old one and connected the new one. The reading was 54. "That's impossible," Dr. Sutton said. "If his pressure was really that high, he'd be dying right now. His pupils would be huge and fixed. But look at him. His pupils are normal. They react to light. His heart rate is fine. His blood pressure came down with medication. By every other measure, he's stable." She was right. Two different pressure monitors, both properly placed, both functioning correctly, were telling us his brain was under lethal pressure, but the patient looked okay. It was like having a thermometer tell you someone has a fever of 110 degrees while they're sitting there looking perfectly healthy. At 8:30, I called my boss, Dr. Blake Wagner. He'd been a brain surgeon for 30 years. If anyone had seen something like this before, it would be him. I explained everything. He was quiet for a long moment. "Eric, I'm coming in right now," he said. "Don't do anything else until I get there." He arrived within an hour. I walked him through everything. The fall, the surgery, the impossible pressure readings. He listened without interrupting. Then he went into Cole's room. I watched through the window as he examined the patient, checked his pupils, looked at the monitors. Then he placed his hand on Cole's chest. I saw him jerk his hand back, then slowly place it there again. He felt it too. He came out of the room looking pale. "I need to show you something in my office," he said. We went to his office. He unlocked an old file cabinet, the kind we don't use anymore since everything's on computers now, and pulled out a thick folder. It was yellowed with age. "This was 17 years ago," he said, "before your time here, before we had electronic medical records." He opened the folder. It was a case from 2008. A 29-year-old woman named Haley Chambers. She'd been in a terrible car accident. Dr. Wagner had operated on her, removing blood from around her brain, just like I'd done for Cole Franklin. The notes were handwritten. Dr. Wagner's handwriting. I read through them until I found what he wanted me to see. Day after surgery, patient doing well, but pressure monitor showing readings of 52-58, even though patient looks stable. Changed monitor twice. Same readings. CT scan looks fine. Can't explain it. 2 days after surgery, pressure now reading 61. Patient still looks okay. Pupils normal. Blood pressure controlled. Called the device company. They say monitor is working correctly. Noticed the strange vibration when examining patient. Don't know what's causing it. 3 days after surgery, patient died at 4:30 this morning. Listed cause of death as complications from brain injury. Family didn't want an autopsy. I looked up at Dr. Wagner. "Did you ever figure out what happened?" "No," he said quietly. "I tried. I contacted the company that makes the monitors. They sent an engineer. He tested everything and said it was all working fine. I called a colleague at Johns Hopkins, one of the top experts in the country on brain pressure monitoring. He had no explanation. Eventually, I convinced myself I'd missed something during surgery. Some small bleeding I didn't see. Something. "But you never really believed that," I said. "No, I didn't. And now it's happening again." We went back to the ICU. Over the next 6 hours, Cole Franklin's condition stayed stable. His blood pressure was controlled. His pupils stayed normal and reactive. The breathing machine kept him oxygenated. But the pressure monitor kept climbing. 56, 59, 62. At 3:00 in the afternoon, I was sitting at the nurse's station when Melody called me over. "Dr. Davidson, his eyes are open." I rushed to his bedside. Cole Franklin's eyes were indeed open. Not just open, they were moving, following movement. I moved my hand from left to right, and his eyes followed it. I stepped back, and his gaze found me. This shouldn't have been possible. He was on heavy sedation, powerful medications that should have kept him completely unconscious. But his eyes were alert, aware, watching. The pressure monitor read 67. Dr. Wagner was back in the room. "This isn't medically possible," he said. "A pressure of 67 should cause immediate death, but he's awake and aware." "What do we do?" Dr. Sutton asked. Nobody had an answer. Word spread through the hospital. Nurses from other units came by during their breaks, just to see the patient who defied all logic. Some of them felt the vibration when they touched his chest. Others didn't. But everyone agreed something was fundamentally wrong with this situation. That evening, the hospital's medical device specialist came up. His name was Austin Shepard. He brought 3 different pressure monitoring systems with him, including one that used completely different technology than what we'd been using. We placed it at 7 p.m. The reading, 71. "The device is working correctly," Austin said. He looked shaken. "I've tested it myself. The readings are accurate." "But they can't be," I said. "Look at him." We both looked through the window at Cole Franklin. His eyes were still open, still tracking movement. A nurse was adjusting his IV fluids. His blood pressure was 128/72. Heart rate was 74. By every measure except the pressure monitor, he was doing relatively well for someone who'd fallen 4 stories onto concrete. That night, I stayed at the hospital. I couldn't leave. I pulled up every medical article I could find on brain pressure, head injuries, and monitoring equipment. I read for hours. I found case reports of monitoring errors, calibration problems, rare technical glitches. But I found nothing like this. Around midnight, I went back to check on Cole. The night nurse, a younger man named Jordan Pierce, was at the computer documenting his assessments. "How's he doing?" I asked. "Vitals are stable," Jordan said. "But Dr. Davidson, I need to tell you something. About an hour ago, I was in here turning him to prevent bed sores, and I heard something." "What do you mean?" "A sound, like humming. Very low, almost below hearing. I thought maybe it was the ventilator or some equipment, but I checked everything. It wasn't any of our machines. It was coming from him." I walked to the bedside. Cole's eyes were closed now. His body had finally given in to the sedation. I stood there in the dim light, listening, and I heard it. Jordan was right. A low humming sound, so deep you felt it in your chest more than heard it with your ears. I went back to my office and pulled out the old file Dr. Wagner had shown me. I read through the case notes on Haley Chambers again, more carefully this time. Near the end, Dr. Wagner had written in hurried handwriting, "Nurses reported unusual sounds from patient's room on the night she died. Investigated but couldn't find the source." I sat back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. 2 cases, 17 years apart. Same hospital, same impossible pressure readings, same unexplained vibrations, same sounds. The next morning, March 16th, I came in at 6 a.m. Cole Franklin had died at 4:17 a.m. The night nurse told me his vital signs had been stable, and then suddenly they weren't. His blood pressure dropped. His heart became irregular. His heart stopped. They'd called a code blue, performed CPR for 30 minutes, but couldn't bring him back. The pressure monitor at the time of his death had read 93. I requested an autopsy. The family initially said no, but I spoke with them personally. I explained that their son's case was highly unusual, that we might learn something that could help other patients in the future. They agreed. The autopsy was performed 3 days later by Dr. Evelyn Barker, a pathologist I'd worked with many times over the years. She opened Cole's skull and exposed his brain. We all expected to see massive swelling, obvious trauma that would explain those pressure readings. But the brain looked relatively normal for someone who'd undergone the surgery and trauma Cole had experienced. There was swelling, yes, evidence of the injuries we'd addressed, but nothing catastrophic, nothing that would explain a pressure reading of 93. "I don't understand," Dr. Barker said. "Based on your pressure readings, I expected to see severe swelling, maybe the brain herniating down through the base of the skull. But this doesn't match that at all." We spent 2 hours examining every part of Cole's brain under the microscope. The outer layers, the inner white matter, the deep structures, the brain stem. Everything was photographed and documented. There was nothing that would explain what we'd measured. I met with Dr. Wagner in his office afterward. We sat in silence for a long time. "What do we do with this?" I finally asked. In Haley's case, I documented everything in her medical record. I reported it to the hospital administration, and then I moved on because there was nothing else I could do. The family didn't want more investigation. The hospital wasn't interested in what they called a medical device issue, and I had other patients who needed me. "But you never forgot it," I said. "No, I never forgot." Over the next few weeks, I tried to find other cases like this. I searched medical journals. I contacted colleagues at other hospitals. I reached out to the companies that make pressure monitors. I found a few cases of monitoring problems, but nothing like what we'd experienced. Most were simple equipment malfunctions with easy explanations. Then I found something. Not in a medical journal, but on an online forum where neurosurgeons discuss unusual cases. Someone had posted about a case from Oregon in 2015. Severe head injury, emergency surgery, impossible pressure readings that didn't match how the patient actually looked. The post had only 3 replies, all saying it was just equipment error. I sent a private message to that surgeon. His name was Dr. Derek Fisher, practicing in Portland. He responded within hours. "I've never talked about this with anyone outside my team," he wrote back. "Everyone thought I was incompetent, but I know what I saw. The monitors were working correctly, and yes, there was a vibration and a sound. Low frequency, almost below hearing. The patient died after 36 hours. The autopsy showed nothing that explained it." We talked on the phone the next day. He'd tried to investigate just like I had, and he'd hit the same walls. No similar cases in the medical literature. No interest from his hospital. The grieving family didn't want their loved one to be a research subject. "Did it happen in the ICU?" I asked. "Yes, room 412. "What time of day did the pressure start rising?" There was a pause. "Early morning, around 6 o'clock. "Why?" "Both of our cases showed pressure elevation starting around 6 in the morning." Another pause. "That's probably just coincidence. That's when nurses do their morning assessments. More activity in the unit." "Probably," I said, but I wasn't convinced. I started carefully reviewing old medical records, not breaking any privacy rules, but looking at any deaths in our ICU that seemed unusual. Over 3 weeks, I found 4 more cases. Not all were brain surgery patients. One was a stroke. Another was a brain tumor patient. But they all shared certain things: unexplained deterioration despite normal imaging, death in the early morning hours, and nursing notes mentioning unusual sounds or vibrations. None of the doctors who'd treated these patients had connected them. Why would they? They'd happened over 15 years. Different doctors, different shifts, different types of illness. The only connection was the location: Valley Presbyterian Hospital, Neuro ICU. I brought this to Dr. Wagner. We spread the medical records out on his desk like detectives. "This is starting to sound less like medicine and more like something else," he said carefully. "I'm not suggesting anything supernatural," I said quickly. "There has to be a logical explanation. Maybe it's environmental, electromagnetic interference from hospital equipment, vibrations from the building, something that affects both the patients and the monitors. Then why doesn't it affect all patients?" I didn't have an answer. The hospital administration wasn't interested when I requested a meeting. I presented everything I'd found to the chief medical officer and the head of patient safety. They listened politely. Then they told me I was seeing patterns that didn't exist, that I was experiencing something called confirmation bias, where you see what you're looking for even when it's not really there. They suggested I was exhausted and should take time off. I didn't take time off. Instead, I contacted the monitoring device companies again. This time, one engineer took me seriously. Her name was Kinsley Pratt, and she worked for one of the major manufacturers. "We've had reports like this before," she told me on the phone. "Not many, maybe a dozen over 20 years, from different hospitals around the country. Always the same: pressure readings that don't match reality, unexplained vibrations, sounds. We've investigated every time. The devices are working correctly." "So what is it?" I asked. "We don't know. Our best guess is some kind of environmental interference we haven't identified. But honestly, Dr. Davidson, the cases are too rare. We can't justify spending money to research it." After that conversation, I started to let it go. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. I had other patients, other surgeries. Life in a busy hospital doesn't stop because you're obsessed with an unsolvable mystery. But I can't completely forget. Every time I admit a brain surgery patient to the ICU, I watch the monitors more carefully. I listen for sounds that shouldn't be there. I pay attention to things I used to ignore. It's been 8 months now. I still work at Valley Presbyterian. I still perform brain surgery. I still take night call. But I requested that my post-operative patients be placed in different ICU rooms when possible. Not the rooms where these things happened. Administration approved the request without asking why. I think they were just relieved I'd stopped bringing it up. Last month, I got an email from Dr. Fisher in Oregon. Another case. Same presentation. Same impossible readings. Same outcome. But this time, his hospital had installed environmental monitoring equipment in the ICU for an unrelated study. The sensors recorded unusual low-frequency vibrations that spiked at the exact times the pressure readings became impossible. Vibrations you can feel but barely hear. But here's the strange part, Dr. Fisher wrote. The vibrations weren't coming from any hospital equipment or the building. They were localized to within 6 feet of the patient's bed, and they started exactly 6 hours after surgery ended. I haven't responded to that email yet. I don't know what to say. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in supernatural explanations. But I also know that medicine still has mysteries we can't explain. The human brain, for all we've learned, is mostly unknown territory. We can see its structure. We can measure its electrical activity, but we can't explain consciousness. We barely understand what makes us human. Maybe what I witnessed is part of that vast unknown. Maybe in 50 years, someone will figure it out, and it'll have a perfectly logical explanation. Maybe it's something about how injured brain tissue interacts with monitoring equipment under specific conditions we haven't identified yet. Or maybe some things aren't meant to be understood. I still practice neurosurgery. I still operate on people's brains. I still save lives when I can and lose patients when I can't. But something changed in me after Cole Franklin. There's a weight I carry now, an awareness that wasn't there before. Every time I place a pressure monitor, I wonder if it's really measuring what I think it's measuring. Every time a patient's condition doesn't match the numbers, I wonder if I'm seeing the beginning of something impossible. And sometimes during quiet nights when I'm on call, I walk past those ICU rooms, the ones where it happened, and I listen. I haven't heard anything yet, but that doesn't mean there's nothing there.